Imagine not being able to read the paper because your hands were shaking. Imagine not being able to read newsprint as your world faded to black. The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. With your host, Lee Martin, and co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine.
Welcome to this week's National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. Today we have a special taping of our show with a very special guest. Now, I'm your co-host, Florence Myers-McSwine, here with your host, Mr. Lee Martin, along with our very special guest, President Mark Riccobono. So, President Riccobono, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, Mr. President, we here in Indiana are very grateful that you accepted our offer to come onto the NFB Newsline Indiana show. And we have so much to discuss, and we know we have the right person on the show to discuss these questions with and just find out a little bit more about what makes Mark Riccobono tick as well.
Well, I can tell you about that. That is for sure.
And, first of all, we want to start talking a little bit about a service of the National Federation of the Blind, which is the National Federation of the Blind Newsline. Now, we know that you are an avid user of the service and a supporter of the service. So kind of tell us a little bit about how NFB Newsline impacts your life and how you feel it should impact other people's lives, subscribers' lives, and people that haven't subscribed.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And certainly thank you for the opportunity to talk about NFB Newsline. I think I first became a subscriber of NFB Newsline in 1996 when I was a college student. At that time, I don't remember how many newspapers there were, not nearly what there is today. There was a handful. You could almost name all of them. And it was only touch-tone telephone. I have been using NFB Newsline in all of its forms now, telephone, mobile app, delivery via email, to keep up on the latest news, to get cutting-edge information in times like COVID-19, to keep up with sports teams, to get recipes from one or another of the magazines that are there. All the ways you can think of using Newsline, I've been able to use it. And today I primarily use the mobile app. And I often, when I find something that's of interest, I email it to myself. Can do that right in the app. And I'm really excited now that the Newsline application also includes the core technology of KNFB Reader, so you can use your smartphone with the mobile app to take a picture of a piece of print and read it. Newsline is a great service. It's free, so blind people should take advantage of it. It gives us access to more information, I think, than most sighted people have access to. And the most important thing is it belongs to us. We get to define what else we want it to do, what features we want to add to it in the future. It's our service, and we get to continue to shape it. And then the best way to do that is give feedback on what we should do with it in the future.
We're talking about the future, and I guess coming from 1996 with the service, it has really expanded itself. And I'm just proud to be a member of the organization, as well as working with this NFB Newsline service here in Indiana. Florence, I know you have a question for him that you were wanting to talk about.
What I would like to do is talk more about you and your journey to becoming the president of the National Federation of the Blind. So we have quite a bit to talk about today.
That's a long journey, that's for sure.
How long have you been a member of the National Federation of the Blind?
Oh, well, I started using Newsline very shortly after I became a member. I actually joined in 1996, and I think Newsline first became available in the state of Wisconsin, where I was living. Actually, it might have been early 97 that I first became a subscriber. I had only been a Federation member for a number of months. At that point, I was still learning about the nature of what we do in the National Federation of the Blind. I was starting to study our philosophy about blindness and it in my own life, and it was very different than what I was used to. It was a different way of thinking about blindness than what I was used to, and the idea that I could have access to information like was available in NFB Newsline was really refreshing for me. I was used to um, situations where I didn't have to read because I didn't have the tools to read. I was never taught Braille when I was in school. And so the Federation really helped open my mind and heart to something different, a way to live. And it continues to be something I evolve and practice in my life.
Now, President Riccobono, as you evolved into the National Federation of the Blind, as we go down this path, you participated in something that I really was kind of jealous of you doing this. I said, I wished I could have done that. And that is the Blind Drivers Challenge. You want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, how far to go back? I came to Baltimore 2003. I was invited to join the staff of the National Federation of the Blind. I had been running educational programs in the state of Wisconsin, and our president at the time, Mark Maurer, offered me a job, and I showed up and said, "Here I am. What am I supposed to do?" And he sent me on various projects. A lot of them were crazy projects that had definition to them. I was just supposed to pursue them. And so what I would do is go talk to members of the Federation and try to work them out. And at that time, we had just opened our Jernigan Institute, our research and training center here in Baltimore. And we were talking about building a car that a blind person could drive, which I thought was a crazy idea that was never going to happen. I'm just letting you know, I thought it was never going to happen. Well, it turned out that I took a call from Virginia Tech, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to work on this blind driver challenge you have. Will you come talk to us about it?" Okay, sure. So I went on, and they said, "We build cars that drive themselves. So we can just put you in the back seat and push a button, and we'll be done." And I got up and I paced around the room and I said, "No, no, no, no. That's not what we want. We want to build a car that a blind person can drive. A blind person has to be able to use the steering wheel, push the pedal, be able to crash the car." They said, "You want to crash the car?" "No, no, no. Don't want to crash the car, but it has to be real enough. There's a possibility of crashing it. It can't just be the computers doing the work. Blind people have to use their mind, their skills, their reflexes to drive." They said, "Oh, that's a little bit harder." That put us on a path of working with Virginia Tech. I won't tell that whole story, but in the process, we needed people to potentially test drive the car. And so I had been working on the project, said, "Well, sure, I'd like to test drive the car." Um, and it sounds more fun than it really was. It was a lot of sitting around waiting for the engineers to fix that thing, and you would go and they'd have to fix something else. And um, after a while, we got to the point where the technology was working, and we kicked sighted engineers out of the car. We said, if we're going to actually demonstrate that this is possible, you can't be sitting in the back seat because even if you're doing nothing, it looks like you're doing something. And so I was a good friend of Neil Lewis. The two of us were the primary test dummies at that point. And I was the first one to get to drive without anybody else in the car. And it turned out to be more powerful than I expected. The idea that we could build a technology that would allow a blind person to navigate a car independently with nobody in the car. I wasn't doing anything different. I had been testing. It just felt so when there was nobody in the car. So I rolled down the windows, turned on the radio, do when you drive, right? It's January, so it was a little cold, but took off. We rented a racetrack in order to test this car. And one of the most powerful experiences of my life, being in the middle, again, building a technology driven by blind people, our hopes and dreams. And we were really the only ones that believed it was possible. And I'm glad you brought that up because we're coming up to the 10th anniversary in January 2021. And it's because of what we did 10 years ago that we have been able to put blind people in the center of the automated vehicle development that's happened over the last decade. And it's because of that work that we did more than years ago that is going to make sure that blind people have access to automated vehicles in the future when they start driving on our roadways in a major way.
I'm Danny Wayne Beamer, Program Manager of the Elder Blind Program at the Will Center in Terre Haute, Indiana. I introduce the NFB Newsline to seniors in 13 southwestern counties in Indiana. I also utilize the NFB Newsline for my radio station public affairs shows. The NFB Newsline. Experience it today.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
We are the nation's blind, and we read NFB Newsline.
If you or someone you know is visually impaired or print challenged, the National Federation of the Blind has a resource you need.
I use NFB Newsline when reading Hammond Northwest Times.
Using NFB Newsline, I read the Christian Science magazine.
Dad, you read your Jerusalem Post too.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Live the life you want. Read NFB Newsline.
It's free.
Thanks. President Riccobono, what unique strengths, abilities, and perspectives do you think blind youth in this country can use to facilitate the improvement of the lives of our wider blind community, both within the United States and around the world? Thanks.
Well, Misty, I appreciate your question. I guess the first thing I would say is that, blind youth bring a perspective that we need in the organized blind movement. And it's one that is digitally native. It's one that has grown up with embedded with social media. And that's a perspective that we need to incorporate into our work. How do we bring that authentic understanding of those digital tools to our work? We still are very much scratching the surface at the possibilities there. The second thing is, I think the emerging generation has a real ingrained understanding of the intersectionality of characteristics and how that plays with blindness. And that's going to have a huge influence on what we tackle in terms of diversity and inclusion within this movement. And bringing that perspective is going to make a huge difference. The other thing I would say is always true with younger generations. They have new ideas. They think that their ideas are the best ideas. And that's what I thought. And what happens in this iterative process is you figure out, well, they're pretty good ideas, but in order to make them really great ideas, you also have to learn about why we've done what we've done and why we're doing what we're doing in order to make those ideas really powerful. And I am of the opinion that doing work in the United States of America with the organized blind movement we have in this organization has impact all around the world, because we are the gold standard for an organization led, directed, built by blind people. And other countries, other organizations around the world are looking to us because we have the most authentic, blind-driven organization in the world.
As I travel the nation, I read NFB Newsline.
I live in Valparaiso, Indiana, and I listen to my local news on NFB Newsline.
As a student, I enjoy reading current events on NFB Newsline.
Learn more by calling 855-963-6476 or visit nfbnewsline-in.org.
Subscribe free to NFB Newsline today.
President Riccobono, thank you for taking these questions and taking the time. Earlier, you spoke about diversity. So my question to you is, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, what does that look like through the lens of the National Federation as we look at focusing on our future?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it. And I'm sure I don't have a perfect answer to it because I'm still in the process of learning along with everybody else. What it looks like for the National Federation of the Blind is this. First and foremost, we're a blindness-driven organization, and our issues are around blindness. That's what we work on. But we want to embrace, lift up, and celebrate in a better, stronger way than we ever have before the fact that blind people have all variety of intersecting characteristics. And the way we do that is to first start by making sure that within our organization, because that's what we can influence, that we're really living up to the of diversity that we have in our organizational code of conduct, can be found on our website, and that we're building pipelines to bring more diverse blind people into our organization. It's not enough to say that we welcome it. We have to be actively working to build the pipeline of people and then make sure that they stay. I think that's going to challenge us in the future to have very honest conversations about what is or is not happening, or about why we're doing things that we're doing, or why we shouldn't be doing things that we've been doing. I see our organization having a stronger cultural competency amongst our leaders, and in fact, making that a core part of our leadership training going forward, is the recognition that if you're a blind person who's also Black and you're teaching travel, you're going to have a different experience than a blind person who's not Black. And it's our role as an organization to help with those disparities. I mentioned earlier the rehabilitation system, which doesn't treat all blind people the same, that certain resources are available more in certain communities than others. We have to do better than that, and we can drive it through this organization. I hope that increasingly we feel good about the work that we're doing, diversity and inclusion. There's probably never going to be a day when we're going to get it perfect, right? But my hope is that the future looks like we can have that interactive conversation without hostility, and hostility meaning that we don't feel terrible when we get it wrong, that we can honestly say, okay, we missed the mark on that. We do it better next time. We have a lot of work to do, though, and it starts with our organization And that's going to be the mechanism we're going to use to impact others outside our organization. I'm proud that we have a degree of diversity and inclusion already within our movement. It just could be better, and it could be a lot better. And I'm excited about the work that we're doing through our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which is the group that I continue to look to within our movement for guidance and advice about what we need to be doing.
Well, thank you so very much for that comment there, Mr. LaRon Carter. And we'll move on to our next question. So that is with Mr. Christopher Myers.
Riccobono, I've got one question for you about the how we carry ourselves on a day-to-day basis as blind people with this new perspective that we're learning about. So my question for you is, the Federation is venturing into diversity and inclusion efforts in new ways. The discussions surrounding intersectional identities and characteristics has become part of our language and collective work. Does this have any effects on our day-to-day interactions with the sighted world? If so, how do we act, speak, carry ourselves differently given this raised intersectional awareness?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I mean, I think one outward piece is that we want to make sure that blind people are owning all the various characteristics they have, and they feel comfortable doing that. Obviously, we have emphasized blindness, but since we welcome those other characteristics, I think there is a possibility that we will help blind people be more confident about those other characteristics, because we create an environment where it's not just okay to be blind, it's okay to have all those other characteristics as well. And so I think that's going to have an influence on what blind people do publicly. I guess the second thing I would say is, part of what I feel like we're doing is helping blind people have a stronger awareness of some of those implicit bias that exists. And we're doing it for the context of our organization. But I hope people would take that learning and utilize it in other aspects of their life. And I think that that's going to have value in society. What we hope, by the way, as part of that, is that by our members going out, that we bring diversity, that we bring blindness to the diversity and inclusion conversation more broadly. Because when you hear about diversity and inclusion, it usually doesn't include blind people. And what we can do externally is start to bring blind people into the center of that discussion. Say, these things are important, but we also need blindness to be part of this dialogue.
Any recent progress on some of the mentoring programs which the Federation is engaged in? I know that there are a number of different mentoring programs through the student division, and I think that there are some other business partnerships, but is there any progress for mentoring for young people?
I mean, mentoring is always something we do. We've been doing it in informal and formal ways for 8 decades now. It's always something we're working on. I think that what we do is we build this network, and we want to keep strengthening it and finding different dimensions of it. So yes, we're making progress. We've started some work with Pearson, having a mentoring program where it's not just connected with blind people, it's connected with sighted professionals. We're going to explore that with more companies and organizations as we go forward, to really take the great mentoring work that we've been able to do for the decades informally and create new ways to formalize it. So I'd say mentoring is always something we're working on. It's always taking new shapes. And now with the virtual environment that we're in, we're still learning about the best way to make the virtual mentoring effective, powerful as we can. And we need people's ideas about what works and what doesn't in that regard.
I would like to first thank you, President Mark Riccobono, for spending this afternoon with us, for sharing and enlightening us as well as the other listening audience. We find it was a pleasure talking with you, and it's an honor speaking with you about these topics today. In closing it out, though, Lee, I always seem to go back to, again, one of my favorite quotes from Edward Hale. And that is, I am just one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. I will not let what I cannot do deter me from what I can.
Okay, and I thank you for that, Florence. And with our very special guest today, President Mark Riccobono, do you have any words that you would like to part with us today?
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to say is that the National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. And I would invite you to join us on our journey, where every day we raise the expectations for blind people, because we recognize that low expectations create obstacles between blind people and our dreams. If you're not yet a member of ours, we need you to be part of our movement. We need your help. It's a lot of work to be done to make blind people truly first-class citizens in this society, and to innovate in the way that we know blind people can and have for decades. We need your help to go to the rest of the way to freedom for the blind, and to innovate technologies like NFB Newsline that are authentically driven by blind people. We want to be a better organization because we're a people's movement, and the more people we have in it, the better. So I'd invite you to join us. Go to nf.org and go to join us if you are not yet a member. We hope you'll get involved in Indiana, as well as other places you might end up in this nation.
Well, thank you so very much. All of our students that ask questions, thank you very much for your time today, President Mark Riccobono, and may God bless you and your family as we continue forth, focusing on our future.
The National Federation of the Blind, Newsline, Indiana. For more information, go to nfb-in.org or call 855-963-6476. That's 855-963-6476. The National Federation of the Blind encourages you to live the life you want.